Today we're going to be talking about the 2011 Thailand flood. This flood was unique due to the unusual heavy rainfall. In March 2011, they received 37% more rainfall than usual, and in June they had 110% more rainfall than usual. Wind and sea conditions played a role but were not the main factors. The primary cause was the heavy rainfall and not the snowmelt. 5 tropical storms hit Thailand from June to October. La Niña lasted from 2010 to 2011. It warmed ocean temperatures, causing more rainfall. La Niña created stronger trade winds, which created stronger storms. The unusual weather patterns and La Niña intensified the flooding and rainfall. Flooding occurred during and extended beyond the typical monsoon season.
I'm going to be talking a little bit about the magnitude of the 2011 Thailand flooding. So, these floods were not much different from the floods that had come before it. So there were about 6 major flood years in the past 63 years, so that's roughly every 10 to 20 years there were huge floods like this one, but what made this one particularly catastrophic were the high sea levels, the pre-monsoon season rainfall, and the high soil moisture levels that were occurring during 2011. These conditions created kind of the perfect storm for flooding, but in addition to the special conditions, there were several other factors that impacted the flood. Some of these were poor drainage systems and prevention strategies, as well as failed flood barriers. So the impact of the 2011 flood in Thailand was pretty big. It impacted central and western areas heavily. The Chao Phraya River Basin was especially susceptible to flooding because of its flat topography, because there was nowhere really for the water to flow other than to just flood. And there were about 20 million people that live in this river basin, so the region was heavily impacted by the flood. The flood lasted over 158 days, so the 20 million people that lived in this river basin were deeply affected.
Now we will take a look at some of the societal and economic factors that were impacted by the 2011 Thailand flood. To start off, 13 million people were affected by this flood, and it resulted in the death of 680 people. The total damage and losses amounted to $46.5 billion US. The manufacturing sector took on 70% of the damage due to flooding in industrial estates. The private sector took on about 90% of total costs. 1.9 million houses were affected and 19,000 were destroyed. 17,578 square kilometers of farmland were also impacted and destroyed as a result of the flood. The economy was greatly affected. Floods reduced Thailand's GDP growth by 1.1% in 2011. The floods caused a decrease in exports and tourism, negatively impacting the current account of the country. Tax revenue losses were also high in 2011 as a result of manufacturing disruptions. Thailand is one of the production hubs for global automobile manufacturers, and the number of cars produced was 20% below the expected production number for 2011 due to impacts of the floods. Revenue was lost in a variety of sectors, such as tourism, housing, and the financial sector. There were losses in revenue from accommodation, transportation, shopping, food and beverages, entertainment, and sightseeing. All of these losses being extremely high. As previously stated, there was also a great impact on the farming industry as many farmlands were destroyed. The hurting economy impacted the humans living in Thailand. Poor and marginalized households were severely impacted, with income loss in sectors like wholesale trade, hospitality, and financial services. Urban and rural poor families turned to loans from informal lenders to get by, which led to them facing high interest rates and threats of default. The floods in 2011 also impacted the water quality and led to diarrhea-related epidemics due to water contamination and living hygiene. There was a total of 1,157,861 cases and 50 diarrheal-related deaths as a result of this contaminated water and unhygienic living conditions. There was also turbid tap water, which is water containing sediment, and that was found in areas affected by the flood, making the water unsafe to drink.
Here are some mitigation and adaptation strategies. The government created the Strategic Formulation Committee on Water Management. This committee focused on water management projects as well as long-term sustainability and flood prevention. They built dams to improve water retention. They worked on preparedness for future floods. And they implemented a better warning system. In towns north of Thailand's capital, people had to leave their houses as water was up to 6 feet high in some areas. In 2024, the governor of Thailand implemented a new defense structure against floods called the Thames Barrier, which is made of steel gates and is the second largest flood defense barrier in the world. This is shown to the right.